Okay, so welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us to discuss supporting healthy relationships among new parents. So tiny bit of housekeeping just to start. So yeah, just to say, like I said, the webinar will be recorded, and we'll share it after the session. There will also be some interactive moments through this session today via the polls and the chat function, where you'll be able to share your thoughts and your expertise as well. In addition, please use the Q&A function throughout the session. Your questions will be collated and answered at the end of the webinar. And if we don't get to all of the questions, or we feel like we can't answer them today, then we'll share Q&A after the webinar as well. Okay, so before we get started, let's just do a quick round of introductions of the facilitators in the room today. So my name is Olivia Martin, and I'm a local development advisor at Foundations, and I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Bethan.
Thanks, Liv, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bethan Lemaistre. I am a senior local development advisor at Foundations, working on our Reducing Parental Conflict programme. Lovely to see you all today.
Thanks, Bethan. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Helen now.
Hi everyone, really nice to see you this afternoon. My name is Helen Burridge. I am a Senior Evaluation Officer in the Evidence team at Foundations, and I lead our evidence generation and evaluation strand of the RPC work.
Thanks, Helen. I'm getting a little bit of background noise. Is everyone able to just check that they've got their mics on mute? Thank you. Okay, let's pass it over to Di.
Hi everyone, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Di Robertson, and I'm going to be looking after the chat today and the Q&A.
Thanks, Di. And we have Robin supporting us today, providing some wonderful tech support. So thanks, Robin, for all your hard work in the background. If everyone wants to kind of put their name and their role in the chat as well, that would be great. Really helpful for us to know who's in the room, and for all of you guys to know who's in the room. Okay, have I missed any introductions, or I think we're good to get started. Cool. Okay. So before we start this webinar, I'm going to set the context for the session a little bit. So in consultation with the DWP and local areas, EIF, now Foundations, so our new name, identified new parents as a particular group of interest to explore how parental relationships in this population can impact child outcomes, as well as the role of risk factors. So although widely regarded as a really rewarding and fulfilling experience, I'm sure we've got lots of people who've experienced new parenthood in the room today. New parenthood is also fraught with significant psychological, social, and relational changes to parents' lives. So we developed, kind of recognizing this, we developed a practical guide for local areas to improve understanding of how these risk factors among new parents can impact on parental conflict and in turn child outcomes. The guide will also kind of detail how to effectively engage these parents, what evidence-based support can be offered, and how to appropriately assess progress for these families as well, and kind of measure that progress. This guide is being developed for local leads, commissioners and practitioners as well, to improve understanding of the factors that increase the risk of parental conflict among new parents, how to engage parents, what evidence-based support can be offered, and like I said, how to assess that progress. We will be presenting key messages from the guide in the webinar today, but we'd really encourage you to take a look afterwards in more detail. And I think one of my colleagues is going to post a link to the guide in the chat so you can have a look. Okay, great. So we, sorry, so my chat is, okay. So Foundations was formed from the merger of What Works for Children's Social Care and the Early Intervention Foundation in December 2002, bringing together two sister organisations with a shared mission to use high quality evidence to improve the lives of vulnerable children. So you may be aware, we used to be called the Early Intervention Foundation, and now we've kind of merged, coming together as Foundations. And this is our new branding. So we also have been selected by the DWP as the evidence partner for the National Reducing Parental Conflict programme for the next 2 years. And this work will really build on the legacy of the Early Intervention Foundation, including our portfolio of RPC evidence generation and our work to influence policy and practice as well. So we know that one of the critical ingredients of the National RPC programme has been the interface between evidence and local leadership, giving local authorities and their partners the tools to make healthy relationships part of their early help strategy. And our programme over the next couple of years will focus on what works in the local context, for example, involving families in service planning, and communicating with families who are experiencing relationship distress as well. So if you want to find out more about our Reducing Parental Conflict Hub, please visit our website, so the former website, eif.org.uk. This will remain live whilst our new website is being updated, and you can kind of access all our resources there, and they eventually will be moved over to our new website. Additionally, if you want to find out more about our new merged organisation, you can take a look at our new website, and that's at foundations.org.uk. And I think one of my colleagues will put the link in the chat for you as well. Okay, so that's who we are. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar today. So kind of having introduced the webinar, I just want to set out what we're hoping to cover in the next hour and a half. Okay, so firstly, we're going to provide an overview of the evidence as part of our work to understand how parental conflict amongst new parents can influence children's outcomes. We developed an evidence briefing, as I kind of explained earlier, which Helen will be introducing very shortly. We'll then discuss how you can use research evidence and your own local data to inform planning and strategy development for new parents. And this will include how this aligns with your new Family Hubs development as well. And we're going to include a local area example as well from our colleagues, Emily and Astrid in Bristol, who are also in the room today. This will then lead us on to how we can effectively engage new parents in a relationship support pathway, including how we can use inclusive language to overcome challenges to engaging new parents. Okay, so just before we get started, I think it's important that we just consider some definitions. So you're probably already aware of these definitions, but I thought it's important for us just to kind of make that very clear. So parental conflict can be reflected in a wide range of behaviours, from constructive, so helpful, to destructive, harmful behaviours. Harmful behaviours in a relationship that are frequent, intense and poorly resolved can lead to a lack of respect and a lack of resolution. Research shows that destructive parental conflict puts children's mental health and long-term outcomes at risk. And we define new parents or carers as parents or carers, biological or fostering, in the first 5 years of a child's life. So this includes first-time parents or carers, as well as parents and carers who already have a child or children. And this definition is in consideration of the marked development children undergo during the first few years of life, as well as the impact parents or carers have on children's developmental trajectory during this period. Okay, if you have any questions about any of this, please do feel free to pop it in the Q&A. And like I said, we will collate them for the end of the session. Okay. So this webinar is going to follow the general structure of the evidence guide. If you have it up in front of you, you can kind of look at this page in the evidence guide. So this will include reviewing the evidence and parental conflict between new parents. We will then move to the plan section. So I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can we just make sure that everyone's mute, mics on mute? Thank you. So then we're then going to move to the plan part of the section, which will support your understanding of how you can use this evidence to inform local planning and develop your local strategy with a particular focus on family hub development. We will then build on this by discussing how we engage new parents within an effective relationship support pathway. So we're not going to specifically be covering the measure part of the guide today, but we would encourage you to take a look at this in the context of your local evaluation. Okay, so before we get started with the evidence, we're going to do a really quick poll to understand what you're hoping to learn from the webinar today. So Robin, if you wouldn't mind sharing that poll, that would be great.
Sorry, 1 second.
Thanks,
and it should
Robin.
be loading now.
Okay, I'm just going to give everyone a minute or two to consider that. Okay, great. So I'm going to pass over to Helen now, who's going to tell you about the evidence.
Thanks very much, Liv. Yes, can I have the next slide, please? So today I'm going to be talking through the evidence section of our guide on new parents. But just like before I get stuck into the evidence that we present in the guide, I just thought I'd quickly talk through why evidence is important. So using research evidence can help you make the case for the importance of promoting healthy relationships among new parents, and it can help persuade local stakeholders to commit to local support for new parents and healthy relationships. And research evidence should also inform the choices that you make about the support that you're providing in your local area. So when we were creating this guide, we searched for evidence which has been produced in the UK and international evidence as well. So we found from our searching that there's actually quite limited UK-based research on parental conflict among new parents. So we've drawn on the best available evidence that we could find, and we've incorporated international evidence where that felt relevant. So to create the evidence section of the guide, we reviewed academic papers and we summarised the evidence that we found from these different academic papers to provide a briefing on the evidence. I won't go any more into the methods that we use, but we have got an appendix, which is part of the report, if you'd like to delve a little bit deeper in terms of understanding how we created the evidence review section of the guide. Next slide, please, Liv. So just to provide kind of an overview of the evidence that we reviewed as part of the guide. So overall, the evidence suggests that, can I have the previous slide, please? Yep, next slide. Thank you, Liv. So the evidence shows that although new parenthood is regarded as a really rewarding and fulfilling experience for new parents, it's also characterised by difficulties which parents experience, and this results from the psychological, social and relational changes that they experience as part of becoming a new parent. And some of these difficulties are caused by the stress that new parents experience due to the anticipation and then the demand of their new roles and responsibilities. And this context may place additional strain on their relationship and also may influence the wider family dynamics. And the evidence shows that parental conflict among new parents can influence parental mental health as well, which then can in turn influence child outcomes, which are both experienced in the short and the long term. Next slide, thank you. So in the evidence review, we found that the transition to parenthood can negatively impact the parental relationship. So new parents might show increased conflict levels, they might show decreased relationship satisfaction, there may also be decreased quality of interactions, and we also found some evidence which suggested that the transition to parenthood can also cause issues relating to sexual intimacy. So a UK-based study found that mothers and fathers both experience a decline in relationship satisfaction across the transition to new parenthood. But there's mixed evidence with regards to the timing in which they experience these changes. So one study found that both mothers and fathers experience a period of adjustment in the month after birth, and then by 4 months after birth, they adapted to the levels of relationship satisfaction they were pre-birth. However, a conflicting study found that married mothers experienced a decline in their romantic satisfaction from pre-pregnancy to transition to parenthood, whereas fathers experienced this decline at a different period, and that was from the transition all the way up to 3 years after the child's birth. But as I say, there's some conflicting evidence here, so we're not quite sure at the moment how that aligns. So there's a range of factors which have consistently been linked to a decline in relationship quality and satisfaction. And this is linked to a decline during the prenatal, postnatal, and early parenting years. So as you can see here, there's a range of factors which impact how a parent's relationship might change as they transition to become new parents. And these factors include financial stress, stress related to parenting, mental health, so parental depression, the attachment style of an adult, so whether they're anxious or avoidant with their romantic partner, qualities to do with infants and how well they're sleeping and how well they adapt to their emotions. We've got here reduced time that they spend with their partner. Linked to that is lower social support that they receive from their partner. Again, linked with that as well is lower father engagement. We've also got an increase in housework and childcare, and then also impacts on family functioning. And our review of the evidence suggested that all of these factors can impact whether new parents are going to experience parental conflict with the birth or transition to becoming a new parent. Next slide, please, Liv. So our review of the evidence also considered parental mental health and how that can be impacted by the transition to becoming a new parent, and how becoming a new parent can then impact parental mental health. So our review found that there's a range of postpartum mental health issues that are experienced by new parents. And postnatal depression is one example of one of these mental health difficulties that new parents face. And postnatal depression is common. So there's estimates that up to 1 in 10 women experience postnatal depression, but it can also impact fathers and partners as well. And postnatal depression is characterized by symptoms of a depressive mood, a lack of energy, issues with maintaining concentration, issues with sleeping, and perhaps a lack of enjoyment in interests and the wider world. And in the UK, the definition for postnatal depression is that symptoms have an onset within 1 year of giving birth. So parental conflict during pregnancy is linked to a higher risk of the mother and father developing postnatal depression. But there's also an interaction the other way as well. So the onset of postnatal depression has also been linked to a negative impact on relationship satisfaction, which can ultimately lead to divorce or separation. So international research shows that parental conflict or negative couple interactions at the prenatal stage or over the transition to parenthood are associated with parenting behaviours. And our review of the evidence explored the different types of parenting behaviours that parental conflict has been linked to. And this slide presents a summary of those factors. So we found that parental conflict or negative couple interactions has been linked to decreased parental efficacy, which is the parent's belief in their own ability to parent their child successfully. Parental conflict has also been linked with mothers' lower breastfeeding self-efficacy. So that's their confidence in their breastfeeding ability. Parental conflict has also been linked with greater emotional withdrawn behaviour in the parent-infant interactions. There's also links with lowered cooperative parenting. So that's a father having lowered cooperative co-parenting. So that's lowered respect and support for each other's parents. And also a mother's lowered support for the father's parenting. And we also found that parental conflict has been linked with higher competitive co-parenting. And in the literature, that's defined as efforts to undermine or intrude on the other parent's interactions with their child. And we've also found that parental conflict is linked with a lower father involvement in parenting. So it's really well researched in the literature that parental conflict has a negative impact of children regardless of the child's age. But there is strong evidence to suggest that parental conflict among new parents has significant impact on child outcomes. And that includes conflict which happens before the child has been born and conflict that continues in the postnatal stages as well. And our review of the evidence found that prenatal and postnatal conflict has been linked with conduct and emotional issues. So that includes emotion regulation and internalizing problems among children. And it's just worth highlighting here, one of the studies that we included in the evidence review was a large UK-based longitudinal study. And this study found that prenatal parental conflict was associated with conduct and emotional outcomes at 42 months after the child had been born. And parental conflict predicted later conduct difficulties in children as well. So that study highlights that parental conflict has immediate and long-lasting impacts on children who are exposed to parental conflict. And the study found that the association remains after postnatal stresses are taken into account. So that's quite a quick review of the evidence that we include in the guide. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at the guide in more detail to consider how the evidence aligns with your local strategy and your local practices. So I'm going to pass over to Bethan, who's going to explore that in a little bit more detail.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. That was a really helpful overview of the evidence. So as Helen mentioned, I am now going to take us through and discuss in a little bit more detail about how you might use or might consider using the research evidence to inform local strategy and local practice. And this is largely covered in the plan section of the guidance. So if you can remember back to the structure of the session we set out at the beginning, this is largely covered in the plan section. But we did also want to take the opportunity to broaden the discussion a little bit in recognition of some of the opportunities around Family Hub development. So as I mentioned, different resources that we'll be drawing on, my colleagues will share those in the chat as we go. So just to move on, so the guidance makes some initial suggestions about how the research findings could be used, and they include activities such as thinking about the data that may inform relevant strategic needs assessments. So thinking potentially about a particular reducing parental conflict needs assessment, or also as part of a broader JSNA. But also this could be considered in the context of your local needs assessment for family hubs. So often this is thinking about the consideration of parental conflict in relation to the known risk factors, and may include information that's already being collected as part of those needs assessments. But there's also some suggestions in the guidance about relevant data and information that could be included and how you might link that back to reducing parental conflict. So another way of considering the guidance and using the information is to think about specific partners who may already be involved in your local work to reduce parental conflict, but also to recognise where there might be opportunities to, for example, broaden the membership of your RPC steering group, or think about other partners that might need to be engaged locally. So that might also include thinking about or considering who's received local parental conflict training, and whether in the context of what we know about the impact on new parents, whether there may be other parts of the workforce or partners that would benefit from your local RPC training. And also thinking about using the guidance as a starting point to consider or build existing relationships. So thinking about those who might be responsible for new parent support services and opening up the discussion around the evidence, and also thinking about how the evidence could support conversations about relationship support for new parents. So if we can move on to the next slide, Liv, thank you. So in this section of the guidance, we consider some of the key research evidence, so some of the information that Helen has just presented, and then try and break that down so we can think about locally how that might be used to inform decision making and also data collection. So thinking about this example that's taken from the guidance, considering the research on how the transition to parenthood can negatively impact the parent relationship. It then suggests some areas for consideration, such as how well the risk of parental conflict among new or soon-to-be parents is understood across services, or thinking about what we know about how new parents experience relationship support. And I think most of the questions that are posed within this section of the guidance can be linked into discussions that are happening locally as part of Family Hub development. So thinking about local delivery plans, but also workforce planning and training and development needs. And the questions that inform data collection, so in the third column of the table, are really focused on understanding local data and understanding local need amongst your population. So as I mentioned previously, this could be included, or this could form some recommendations for a local needs assessment, or to think about support for new parents in the context of your local population needs. So we are going to take a brief pause just to ask you to share some initial reflections in the chat. So Helen has presented an overview of the evidence, and I have just very briefly begun to consider how that could be used to inform local practice. But we really wanted to open this up at this point to the group to think about how you might be currently using the information, or some ideas that you might have how you might use some of the evidence in the guide to inform your work locally on supporting healthy relationships among new parents. So I'm going to ask Di just to summarise the discussions in the chat for us. So if you have any thoughts on this, if you could start popping those into the chat, that would be really helpful. Some of the things we've considered have been thinking about how the evidence might inform local training plans for parental conflict, how the information might be used to inform local strategic needs assessments, and we've also started to consider sort of some of that Family Hub development, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then also thinking about how it might shape discussions around support for new parents. But I shall stop talking for a second and just hand over to Di to summarise what's being shared in the chat.
So we've got one comment so far, Bethan, which is from M, which is targeted presentations for relevant services supporting new parents, including this evidence and promoting pathways to support.
Mm-hmm.
And then Donna said from Kensington Chelsea, when we think of new parents, we think of adults older than 25, however, working with young parents how do we support them with RPC 25 and younger, which I think is a really, really important point, Donna. I've set up a young parents group and I want to include RPC. So that sounds fantastic. Dawn is saying incorporated within training deliveries of RPC, one-to-one work with families. Michelle, some joint work with health visitors for new parents, which sounds like a brilliant idea. Perinatal mental health services, Emily from Bristol. Training the peer support team in the importance of RPC and the resources available which they can use with their clients or as a form of signposting. Jackie from Northumberland says, we find sharing the evidence with practitioners really helpful when engaging referring parents as it has more meaning. Yeah, really good point, Jackie. Sam, how it affects breastfeeding and how breastfeeding training and support can be adapted to consider that more than it already is. Yeah. And Emma from Hampshire says, I've been thinking about how to start reviewing evidence available with our now multi-agency working group for RPC. I think this will be a good place to start, an area I am comfortable facilitating too. I would usually focus on a couple of key questions about whether the evidence reflects what people are experiencing in their practice and how the findings could help in their practice. Yeah, really good idea, Emma. And Stephen says, from Brighton says, we're developing a Start for Life strategy as part of our Family Hub's transformation in Brighton and Hove. This evidence can help us inform the direction of that, which is brilliant that it's going to contribute to that development work, Stephen. Thank you. Lots of ideas. Intensive health visiting schemes for those who need it. That's from Astrid. Again from Emma, I hope to be able to use the evidence to support discussions with our multi-agency partners working in the first 1001 critical days with an aim to make the case support these practitioners' engagement with RPC. Tom from the DWP said, consider cross-agency data collection to be used for planning and outcome measures. Yeah, really good point, Tom. And making targeting training to relevant services where we can including family nurse partnerships, yep, and perinatal. Shall I keep going?
Go on, Di. You're nearly there. Or I thought what I could do is come back to you at the end when you've had a chance to summarise some of the comments that are still coming through. Would that be helpful?
There's loads coming through. I mean,
there's so many brilliant ideas in there. So I'll give you a little bit of time while the last few are coming through, put you on the spot there, and then we can we'll come back to you towards the end of this session for just the last few themes that have come through, but some really, really brilliant ideas in there. So really, really good to hear and see, and thank you everyone for sharing those, and hopefully starting to think about I think it will be a long way back in the chat now, but I saw some comments in the initial poll question about thinking about some more practical kind of ways of engaging new parents as well. So I think there's some really interesting ideas coming through. So I'm going to take a moment now just to zoom out a little bit and to think about the alignment between relationship support and family hubs, and to really think about sort of what some of the key areas might be. And we've summarised here some areas where there's potentially some further consideration, some thinking about where we can really align some of the existing activity. So the first of these is thinking about strategic planning. And here we've considered the opportunity to think about the use of your local RPC planning tool, which I know many people will have completed very recently, and to link that in with the system assessment work for family hubs. So if you're familiar with the maturity self-assessment for family hubs, think about how the planning tool is aligning some of that and how the information could be used within the planning tool and vice versa within the system assessment for family hubs. Also thinking about local data on risk factors, which we've talked a bit about already, in terms of thinking about that in the context of your family hub's needs assessment. I think a lot of the comments that we saw in the chat recognise the opportunities for workforce development, and there are further opportunities, I think, through the family hub workforce and considering training for that workforce to ask about parental relationships and signpost to support where appropriate. And also an opportunity, I think, to normalise conversations about relationships and not just sort of when there's an identified problem. And then we'll speak later in a little bit more detail. I know some of the comments initially and some of the responses to the initial poll were about engaging new parents and talking to new parents about relationship support and their relationships. And Liv is going to talk in a little bit more detail about that towards the end of the session today. So then moving on to leadership, governance and partnership. There are opportunities, we think, to sort of review and monitor plans for activity to support parental relationships across stakeholders, and really kind of encourage senior leaders to across all partners to really champion and activity to encourage fathers to engage with relationship support, and also to raise awareness with and engage wider partners. And then thinking more specifically about community services and interventions, the opportunity to sort of provide awareness raising, web-based, but also printed resources, thinking about posters and leaflets and videos, and really to communicate the relationship support offer. And we'll touch in a little bit more detail about developing that relationship support offer locally for new parents, but also thinking about sort of outreach to staff and parents, and the face-to-face and the digital offer as well. And also thinking about the opportunities to include relationship support or understanding more about relationship support in plans for the development of parent carer panels as well. And some of the suggestions in sort of how we might use the guidance talk about how parents experience relationship support services, so that opportunity through the parent carer panels or through existing partnerships to understand more about that. And then finally, outcomes and evaluation, so supporting partners across the family hub to record parental conflict where this is identified as a need, and then to offer that then offers the opportunity to collect and analyse that local data to better understand the links between parental conflict and outcomes for children, and thinking about how the evaluation of the impact of RPC training and outcomes measures from relationship support interventions can be incorporated within Family Hub evaluation plans. So that's a summary of some of the information that's in our short guide on family hubs and incorporating parental relationships in family hubs, which we will pop a link to in the chat in a moment. So just then zooming back in and thinking back about sort of family hubs and support for new parents, I think more specifically thinking about that support for new parents, there's some key questions within the plan section of the guidance which might prompt some considerations through the development of family hubs locally, or when thinking about your local support offer for new parents, which sort of encourage local areas to consider the involvement of services that support new parents. Also to think about new parents' experiences of relationship support and how parents, and in particular new fathers, are engaged in relationship support. And there are many further examples considered within that section, which can really prompt some of those conversations about support for new parents. So just before we move on, Di, I'm just going to come back to you to see if you've had a chance to summarise those final points that were coming through in the chat.
Yeah, there's a few things I would pick out. You mentioned training already, so a few people have mentioned that, you know, it's useful for informing training. A couple of people mentioned that it's valuable for making the case for a universal offer and really providing truly preventative support, informing commissioning decisions, and also very useful in terms of engaging with health partners, health visitors, and also midwives, and including questions around relationships by those professionals, and also informing outreach support. So I haven't covered everything there, but just a few things that I thought I'd pick out.
Lovely, thanks, Di. And I have just popped the link to the Family Hubs guide into the chat as well. I know the chat is busy today, so bear with us, and Di, you're doing a sterling job. So Liv, if we could just move on to the next slide. And I think just to conclude this section, I thought this quote from Fiona Smith in Durham, who I think is with us today, included in that guidance, just really nicely summarised the opportunity through family hubs that we've alluded to sort of throughout the discussion, to really focus on the quality of family and parental relationships, and the opportunity to begin that work antenatally through the engagement of key partners. So I think that leads us on nicely to our next slide, Liv, if that's okay. And you'll be pleased to hear that I am going to stop talking for just a moment to offer us an opportunity to hear from Emily and Astrid, who have joined us from Bristol to discuss the relationships between public health nursing teams and relationship support. So just briefly to introduce them, Emily is the Policy and Development Manager for Early Intervention and Targeted Services, and Astrid is a clinical lead for public health nursing, and we're incredibly grateful for them for agreeing to give an overview of some of the work they've been doing to support healthy relationships among new parents. So I am hoping this all goes smoothly, and Emily, you're able to take yourself off mute to just give us an overview of your RPC work in Bristol and the partnership with the public health nursing teams.
Yes, of course. Hello, thank you very much for introducing me. I'm also an RPC SPOC and a Family Hub Workstream lead person, so that's a kind of useful overview. And yes, just about a year ago, I contacted our head of children's public health nursing, who at that point had just recruited a professional lead for public health nursing. So Penny Hazelwood and I had a good chat about how we were going to engage our public health partners. That included family nurse partners, health visiting and school nurses in this agenda. There's a lot going on. They were introducing MESH at the time. But what we decided to do was to bring North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, that's part of our integrated care partnership, together and think about it together, and decided that we would commission some training rather than deliver it ourselves from a kind of an organisation that had a good reputation, if you like, already with them. And we wanted to make sure it fitted around MESH, and also, so they had a lot of training going on already, but also that fitted with their kind of particular kind of roles and needs. And we decided to run 2 half-day sessions and one specifically just for managers and supervisors. And then shortly after that, we established a multi-agency reference group, of which Astrid, who's about to speak, is one of the specialist health visitor members. And that sits directly and reports into our Family Hub and Early Help Steering Group, for which the governance arrangements were being kind of finalised at the time as we were sort of putting in our delivery plan. Well, it was before the delivery plans, as we were putting in our kind of MOU, I suppose, for the being part of that programme. And we developed an action plan, and we've just completed our planning tool and reviewed that for this year. And last year's action plan was all about targeting perinatal services and sort of education partners in particular. And it's been helped along by the whole Family Hub agenda very much, because I'm the kind of person that gets invited sometimes to give presentations, all sorts of people about family hubs. And of course, I'll talk about the 5 funded work streams, and parental conflict, reducing parental conflict is a funded work stream too. And then I will pitch depending on who my audience is. So I've managed to do really well, particularly with our sort of perinatal kind of staff and perinatal mental health services. And then it also helped that I was responsible for publishing the Start for Life offer in April, so I had to work really closely with the 2 Sarahs, our also health visiting leads and midwifery, to ensure that all the pages had correct content, etc. And my other responsibility was to establish the parent carer panel, so we've done some work with them in order to kind of get some feedback on those pages, and we're in the position of kind of changing those now. But yeah, public health nursing and us are very much holding very, very tight hands. So yeah, over to Astrid.
Thank you, Emily. That was really helpful. And Astrid, you were just going to tell us a little bit more about how the public health nursing teams in Bristol support new parents with their relationships, and also sort of any future plans, as Emily's alluded to, through the development of family hubs as well.
Thank you, Bethany. Can you hear me okay? Is that all right?
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for what we've heard to date. And it's lovely to see so many people from around the country. It's easy to forget that people are doing all sorts of wonderful things around the country when you're stuck in one place for a long time. And in Bristol, we're undergoing quite a very large transformation at the moment, service-wide transformation across public health nursing. 3 areas have come together, so Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, just to ensure that everything is evidence-based and all the pathways are consistent across the whole of that area. And as part of that, we're using the iThrive approach, the conceptual framework, which hasn't actually been used in public health nursing yet, but comes from CAMHS. And that puts families at the heart of the service. You know, it's all based on their needs. So as with all public health nursing, all our families are offered the 5 key contacts as per the Healthy Child programme, and we assess using a holistic family health needs assessment. And we acknowledge that actually the antenatal contacts are a key point to start talking about parental relationships. And then when additional needs are identified, then we're able to offer support packages delivered by community nursery nurses, which are short interventions and include work on issues such as sleep, which of course is notorious for impacting on parental relationships. I don't need to tell any of the people here. And they also include other things like healthy eating, reducing risk of accidents, etc. But they're tailor-made to the family's needs. And at any point, practitioners can also refer to the parenting support programs run by Emily's practitioners. I've definitely spotted one in the audience. Welcome, Katie. And then in Bristol and North Somerset, we're also delivering 2 intensive home visiting services. So the Family Nurse Partnership, it's currently only offered in Bristol, not in North Somerset, for the teenage parents. And also we're introducing MESH. South Gloss have been doing this for 2 years, and Bristol are just rolling that out. And that offers a more intensive home visiting programme, which builds the therapeutic relationship, which then allows us to refer to the parenting programs much more easily. MESH has come from Australia, and it stands for Maternal Early Childhood Sustained Home Visiting Service. And it's kind of similar to FNP. It's got fantastic resources, and it's all evidence-based as well, and you get a whole load of data back from Australia as well. So yeah, in South Gloucestershire, they really are seeing a difference that's made. We also have rolled out a new baby hub model, and that complements the family hub model. So that's shifted us from the old traditional model of health surveillance, which focuses on weighing and monitoring, etc., to a more health promotion approach, which addresses the psychosocial support needs of parents. And those hubs provide an informal social space where parents can share their experiences and ask questions, and again, increasing confidence in their own parenting styles. And because it's based in the family hubs, of course, that provides a perfect introduction to the family hubs and their resources and all that they offer. And the first 3 family hubs are launching in 2 weeks' time in Bristol, so it's exciting times. And moreover, we've also set up a team of specialist health visitors for perinatal infant mental health. I spotted Claire in the audience somewhere as well. And they are linked closely with the family hub work and are leading on the mental health pathways. And they will provide training and support for health visiting staff. For example, they're going to be training all the health visitors up to do the Brazelton newborn observation. And that helps parents to develop secure attachments to their babies. And they'll also be running courses for parents, such as the antenatal groups and Rockabye. Of course, we continue to work with other providers, the voluntary sector, local councils, and the ICB to ensure that we work as a whole system to embed best practice. And just a word on the training, over the past year, over 160 public health nursing staff members have attended the training, the 2 half-day trainings that Emily just mentioned, including the managers. So awareness of the importance of parental conflict and the impact on children has really gone up. The feedback from this training has been excellent. People have really enjoyed it. To date, the focus has been more on the domestic violence and abuse rather than parental conflict. So now practitioners are much more aware of the resources that are available locally, and who to contact in the children's centres and the family hubs. And there's also a very healthy take up of the newsletter, the RPC newsletter that's produced by Emily's team as well. And we as identified champions in BNSSG have been trying to really roll that out and encourage people to sign up to those, because they are just so full of good information. As part of the transformation programme as well, the electronic records templates are being updated, and therefore routine questioning about parental relationships and those prompts to have that discussion are going to be embedded in that. And then the fact that it's embedded in the templates will then mean it's auditable, and then we can get feedback that way as well and see how many referrals are taken up, etc. And Bristol City Council is also running a randomised controlled trial in partnership with Tavistock Relationships and Sheffield Hallam's University, and that's called the SIPCO project, so the Supporting Interparent Conflicts project, and that compares the mentalisation based therapy, which is provided by the Tavistock Relationships intervention team, with the supported access to 1+1 digital intervention for reducing parental conflict. So we're, as public health nurses, in a perfect position to invite suitable parents to this trial as well. And I've also disseminated that to our school nurse partners, because obviously the cohorts thereafter are 8 to 14-year-olds, or parents of 8 to 14-year-olds. And finally, I think I've also put Emily in touch with the link at the local university, UE, so that hopefully they can get some input into this training right at the start when SCIFN students are introduced to this topic. So yeah, that's a bit of what's going on in Bristol.
Wonderful. Thank you, Astrid, and thank you, Emily. I can see that there was lots of information going into the chat as well, and I think you've talked about a huge range across sort of what we've been discussing this morning, from training to how you're collecting information on parental relationships and parental conflict, thinking about the opportunities for family hubs and the very exciting development of baby hubs as well, which sounds really interesting in Bristol, and some of those specific interventions as well. So it sounds like a huge amount of activity going on, and just a final thank you from me to you both for telling us a little bit more about what's happening in Bristol today. So Liv, I wonder if you can move us on to the next slide. Thank you. So just very briefly, I am going to conclude just by thinking a little bit more about the opportunity to consider the relationship support pathway for new parents, and this is covered in the build section of the guidance. So we know that obviously across local areas there are many services and interventions that are helping new parents, and in particular sort of supporting them to build and maintain healthy relationships and family dynamics, and that support could be universal or might be more targeted, so such as services that are intended to support vulnerable couples during their transition to parenthood. And when we're thinking about sort of an effective support pathway, that really starts with the first services that new parents turn to when they might be struggling with relationship issues, and thinks about then how the wider support services fit together to address parental conflict and reduce the impact it has on outcomes for children. So a support pathway can also include the services and interventions that don't necessarily directly target parental relationships, but that really build trusted relationships with families and may identify that conflict and provide information and self-help resources, or refer people to that targeted support. So Liv, if we could just have the next slide. Again, I think there's a particular role here where family hubs are being developed in identifying the need for parental conflict support and either providing it directly or providing access to more targeted support where it's required. So when thinking about sort of a relationship support pathway locally, either sort of building that relationship support pathway or thinking about how you might better understand and develop that, we've broken it down in the guidance into sort of 3 stages. The initial stage to be thinking about the existing local services and interventions across the continuum of need. So this includes considering where support in relation to key risk factors is available and accessible for parents, and if then there are arrangements to promote healthy relationships through existing local services. Thinking about the needs and characteristics of your local population, so reflecting on the different levels of needs and considering how approaches may need to be tailored to engage families. And you might find the guidance on developing a population needs assessment for reducing parental conflict helpful in structuring thinking around this, but also, as we mentioned earlier, the other opportunities to develop or to feed into broader local sort of strategic needs assessments. And then thinking about the evidence-based interventions that may strengthen or develop your support pathway or are already being delivered. And I think evaluation evidence from those interventions is a really good place to start when reviewing and thinking about how to strengthen a local support pathway for new parents. And interventions that have been through a structured evaluation often offer really important learning about delivery and effectiveness. So even where we might be looking to adapt or develop a local approach, and there can be really important and useful information within those evaluations. And I think I've seen in the Q&A a question about the evidence-based interventions, and there is more information in the guidance about evidence-based parenting and relationship interventions to support new parents. So I would in the direction of that section of the guidance. So just finally, my final slide, just thinking about building that support pathway model. And we've got an example here of how you might construct a local relationship support offer, and the guidance breaks down a step-by-step approach to developing a support pathway for reducing parental conflict, but that can be adapted for different areas. So for example, for considering relationship support in particular for new parents. And I think there are also opportunities here to think about broader mapping of family support that could be taking place. So you could look to amend some of the resources within the guidance, so the survey or focus group questions, to think about asking about support for family relationships and the training that's been received or has been offered to practitioners, which then helps in developing that understanding across the range of support for families, whether that's through family hubs or whether that's being offered through your family support offer, to think about where there are opportunities to develop understanding of the impact of parental conflict. So that was a very quick sort of touching on the developing of the pathway, the support pathway, but I'm going to hand back to Liv now, who's going to talk a little bit more about engaging new parents.
Thank you, Bethan. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to kind of build on that support pathway and think about how we can use it to really effectively engage new parents. So as we've heard from the evidence, and as we know, new parents are not one homogenous group with identical needs. They encompass a range of identities and communities and backgrounds. In addition, for many parents, this could be the first time that they've engaged in relationship or parenting support, and this may feel overwhelming for many reasons. For instance, being a new parent usually requires high demand on their time. This might be difficult for new parents who are facing financial difficulty. They may need to prioritize work instead of kind of attending parenting intervention. So as a result, our services must really try and understand these varied experiences and needs, while also recognizing the similar challenges that many new parents face as well. So this next part of the webinar, we're going to consider the above and think about how we can really effectively engage new parents in family support services. Okay, so first of all, let's consider what we mean by engagement. So this generally includes how parents are approached to access an intervention or service. So this could include the referral process, but it could also include how the service is marketed or advertised, for example, on their website or via leaflets and flyers. So consider, what is this process like for new parents? Is it streamlined? Is it accessible? Are the leaflets inclusive of different identities and families? Next, we consider the extent to which parents remain engaged with an interventional service once they are referred in. So what process do you have in place to ensure those parents feel able to engage with the support available? Next, the extent to which parents actively participate. So this could include how they're able to engage with the material itself and also apply that learning as well. And finally, how are parents involved in the governance, design, and quality assurance of services? So this includes thinking about how we can learn from the lived experience of families and what they're telling us to inform local planning and local strategy as well. Okay. So what challenges do we face in being able to engage parents in relationship support? So there are some common issues in engaging parents in interventions to reduce parental conflict. These might include barriers to accessibility or awareness that they even need support. Local experts are also telling us that on top of this, professionals may lack confidence and knowledge to have conversation with parents about their relationship difficulties. There may be a lack of public awareness around parental conflict looks like, and the parents themselves might not identify it as an issue or that they need support in the first place. Support may not always address diverse family experiences of parental conflict, and families may not feel services are inclusive or that their experiences are understood or represented by practitioners. For example, if we're thinking about new parents, we could consider the needs of very young first-time parents and their experiences of engaging with services. Okay, so additionally, parents may not be able to access technology-based support, or perhaps they don't feel comfortable accessing an intervention online, especially if they're going to be talking about relationship difficulties or parenting difficulties as well. Okay, so there are also challenges around communicating with parents about conflict. For example, recognizing that this conversation could be the first time parents have spoken about their relationship or their conflict to a professional. They may feel additional pressure to be the perfect parent if this is their first time as a new parent as well. And do practitioners feel equipped in using the right language to ensure that new parents feel included in this process, and are practitioners able to access training in regards to this? Okay, and finally, fathers may feel left out from support services. This is because traditionally mothers have been assigned the role and responsibility of the primary caregivers of children, and therefore services are largely been developed with this in mind. For example, we've got a couple of statistics here. So 41% of fathers who have a children's centre nearby have never been invited or attended any children's centre activity. Secondly, 69% of fathers said they thought they were made to feel like a spare part during the pregnancy period as well. So I think these are really kind of interesting statistics, and they kind of make me think that the challenge here is really around creating a cultural shift around parenting services where fathers feel included in the process, as well as ensuring that mothers don't feel that they are bearing the responsibility alone within family support services as well. And I think this feels especially pertinent with new parents and engaging fathers effectively right from the start of their parenting journey. So it's a real kind of unique opportunity to do this really important work with new fathers. Okay, so next I'm going to move on to a couple of strategies to engaging and retaining parents in relationship interventions. So thinking really about how we overcome these challenges. So it's likely that you already have a range of tools and strategies that you're already using in your local service. We've got a couple of additional examples of what local experts have told us as well. Okay, so firstly, collaborate with professionals who have already built rapport with that family. Maybe consider initiatives to raise public awareness around parental conflict and support available. Tailor your delivery arrangements to accommodate the needs of new parents, considering some of the aforementioned barriers to engagement. Maybe offer parents a wide variety of communication channels and delivery formats, and engage fathers at the earliest opportunity. Finally, seeking the input of different groups of families to tailor healthy relationship support provision, and supporting practitioners as well to build confidence in establishing rapport and navigating those kind of really difficult conversations around their relationships. Okay, so the next part of the session, I'm going to play a video, so hopefully the tech will be on my side here. So we have created a guidance document which intended to improve practitioners' skill and confidence talking about parental conflict. And based on this guide, we've produced a short 2-minute video which summarises the key points. And the video provides an overview of the general principles to use when talking about parental conflict. So while you're having a watch, have a think about any advice that you can share about speaking with new parents about parental conflict. And please do share your reflections in the chat. Okay, great. I hope everyone was able to hear that and see that okay. Just kind of reading through some of your comments in the chat already. Thank you for sharing your reflections. Okay, so now we really want to hear from you. So we've developed a short vignette from a question that was actually sent to us from a participant in the room today. Hopefully they're still in the room. So one of your colleagues is providing support to parents who are expecting their first child. Your colleague thinks the couple are experiencing relationship difficulties. What advice would you give for how to talk with the parents about their relationship problems? So drawing on your own professional knowledge and expertise, or the information that we've discussed during the webinar today, if you could just pop into the chat your ideas and your thoughts of what advice you would give to this colleague, and Di will summarize the questions in the chat for us. So I'm just going to give everyone a couple minutes to think about that.
Yeah, we haven't got anything quite yet, but Ash has mentioned that they've done a language consultation with parents, which is a fantastic idea, I think, via a questionnaire. Just asking, you know, what sort of language people want professionals to use with them. So fantastic idea.
So interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Emily says reassure that it's normal, which I think is really, really important. Yeah. Again, parental conflict doesn't sound like something that all of us experience, but actually it is. It's just we use the wrong words sometimes to say stuff. Yeah. Then ask how they manage stress and what works. And yeah, it's interesting how well the issues around stress come out in the evidence, I think, in the guidance, and thinking about how we support parents with stress is really important. Jessica says reassure it's okay and help them to find the right support options for them. Ash says, I would say this is a stressful situation. How are you guys coping with this? Yeah. Caroline Porter, hi Caroline, suggests she starts the conversation with starters such as lots of parents feel like X when they become parents. Is that relatable to you? So again, just normalizing these sorts of experiences. Acknowledging you've noticed things, you are a little strained at times, and that this is not unusual. Could we explore this? Which is a great way of putting it, I think. Thank you, Astrid. Yeah, build a trusted relationship initially. So with a trusted relationship, you can ask all sorts of questions. And people often, you'd be surprised, are really keen to talk about how things are going with their partner or their ex-partner. So yeah, people are less resistant to this conversation than often people think. Claire says, share that everyone has conflict and not all is bad, but does help to get help and support on how to resolve this. Yeah, brilliant. Magdalena says, talk about different stages of relationship. Yeah, there's some really nice infographics around different stages of the relationship, and talk about communication strategies. Yeah, Emily says, talking about stress and communicating better to solve problems, work as a team, much less stigmatizing, exactly, rather than talking about parental conflict. Once you've built rapport and done above, I would want to move to impart knowledge on impact of children and use of videos and tools for reflection is helpful. Yeah, and there's a whole range of videos now available, as well as the See It Differently videos, which really bring home the kind of impact on children and young people, but also don't forget the impact on babies as well. Laura says, talk and listen to each other, discuss feelings, emotions and baggage brought. Yeah, really good point. Let's talk relationships language. What is their biggest worry? We know people can feel this way, etc., etc. Caroline says, how has their relationship changed since knowing they were going to have a baby? Dawn says, normalize. Be professionally curious with each parent as to their story, situation, as to how they feel, offer containment, explore options and the RPC modules, suitability, and to check in along the way. Loads of good stuff coming out, brilliant ideas and lovely use of different sorts of language. Namale says, make sure you address both parents when having the conversation. Really important that we've brought out in the presentation how important it is that, you know, we focus on dads and make sure that fathers are always welcome to services. And Fiona, thank you for your quote, Fiona. Make it real and as exciting as it is tough, and give examples of what challenges they might face and what is important about how you manage this together. Have we got more time? I'm not sure we have.
I think what we might do is maybe collate some of the key themes and send it out afterwards. But some
So many good
really,
ideas.
so many interesting reflections, everyone. Thank you so much. And Di, you are just very talented at collating those responses there. So thank you for your
It's called
support.
reading, Liv.
Well, you're very good at it. Okay, so on that note, we're gonna finish off the session today with some questions and some reflections. So just before we do that, I'm just going to go through what we've covered. So I hope you've found it useful and informative. Thank you all for coming and interacting with the content today. So we've covered an overview of the research on supporting healthy relationships among new parents, looking at our evidence briefing. We've also thought about how we can use research, evidence and data to inform local strategy and inform planning as well. And finally, we looked at some strategies to engage and retain parents in a relationship support pathway. Okay, great. So now's the opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have about the webinar today. And we're also going to send a few poll questions as well, just to understand how you found the webinar today. And yeah, what would be helpful for us to know. So yeah, we'd be helpful if you could kind of just reply to that before we close the webinar today. So before I wrap up, do we have any final thoughts, comments or questions?
Liv, I was just going to make a very final point that I know we shared a lot of different links and resources in the chat as we were going today. We absolutely will collate those into one email for everybody so that they are nice and clear and accessible. And I know the chat will disappear for some people. So as Liv mentioned, we will also collate some of the key messages. We just pop them into the slides where we've had the discussions, so we'll put those kind of key themes within the slides. And I just wanted to say a final huge thank you to Astrid and Emily as well for coming along and talking to us about their work in Bristol as well. So thank you to them.
Yes, thank you, Emily and Astrid. It was really, really valuable to hear about your experiences in Bristol. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up, we just wanted to use this opportunity to tell you about our other parental conflict guides, which you may find useful in your work, especially when thinking about new parents. Is one of my colleagues able just to pop the link in the chat? That would be amazing. So as you can see, we have 5 additional guides here. So in consultation with the DWP and also from feedback with local areas, we selected 5 different family groups as the focus of the guide. So we've written a guide on separating and separated parents, minority ethnic parents, parents with children with behaviours that challenge, parents with mental health difficulties, and we are soon to publish our final guide in the series. So I've posted a link in the chat where you can access these guides again. I really encourage you to take a look. So hopefully they'll be able to inform your practice. Okay, so next steps. So there will be lots of further events coming up, as well as other engagement opportunities over the next couple of years. So keep an eye out for an email from us to be kept up to date with RPC engagement opportunities. We also have a form that you can sign up to now, which Robin is going to pop in the chat for you. And you can sign up to our engagement opportunities there as well. Additionally, you can sign up to our Foundation's monthly newsletter and follow us on social media for more information. So thank you everyone for coming today. It's been really great to see you all, and thank you to all our wonderful facilitators in the room. Hope you have a lovely afternoon, and hopefully we can see you soon.
Thank you.